Economic growth has not just a rate, but a direction. And that direction itself can be either functional or dysfunctional.
Welcome to the PolicyNet podcast by the UNESCO Inclusive Policy Lab. This is the place where top thinkers come to talk data and solutions that reset us along a more equitable and smart path. In April 2023, Mariana Mazzucato joined other leaders at the first UNESCO MOST Forum in Paris. The key concern was how to tangibly shift our societies and economies to finally deliver on the promise of shared prosperity. Mazzucato said that to begin with, we need to be critical about the types of growth we seek.
Financialized growth is a dysfunctional type of growth. Consumption-led growth that is driven by private debt, growth that leads to massive global warming that is soon to be irreversible. That direction of growth is not the kind of growth we want.
She explained what concrete levers can be employed in this shift.
We can use procurement to actually shape an economy. It can be green procurement. It can be outcomes-oriented procurement. Second, investment has to be actually structured around collective learning, sharing the risks and the rewards. Third, this really means putting access, equity, and justice at the center of the design, making sure we share the rewards as equitably as the risk itself was taken.
You're listening to Mariana Mazzucato on the PolicyNet podcast by UNESCO.
Thank you for inviting me. As an economist, what I want to reflect on is that it is not a coincidence that we have crisis after crisis after crisis. They are, of course, systemic crises that are interlinked. The climate crisis, the health crisis, the economic crisis, the digital divide crisis. I believe that the economy itself has been designed to fail. We are constantly reacting to these crises. We don't know how to be proactive. We have to understand the economy and economics very differently. And I'm really focusing on that as an economist because I think it's good to speak about what we know. And the problem is that we have thought of the role of policy, which we all know is important, but at best about fixing problems, literally fixing what economists call market failures. So we are by design always too little, too late. We are by design always out of breath, reacting to problems which we fear. We are fearing that there's market failures. We are in fixing mode, patching up mode, filling the gap mode. And of course, the more dysfunctional each actor is, the more gap there is to fill. So if we look at the business community, for example, the more financialized corporate governance is, the more lack of investment we have actually in the real economy. We have over 1 trillion just last year, $1 trillion having been used just to buy back shares, to boost stock prices, stock options, and executive pay. This has been one of the many leading factors that have increased inequality in terms of the 99%, the 1%, but also the labor share of global income, which is at one of the lowest it's ever been. The capital share is at one of the highest it's ever been. So something like that, a factor like financialization of the global economy, means that then the public sector has to come in and fill that gap of investment. That's a very inefficient way to structure an economy, waiting for one to be dysfunctional and financialized and the other filling the gap. But even when both are doing good things, whether it's in the health innovation space where both public and private have been investing, if we don't actually shape that investment, shape that collaboration, shape that ecosystem to be driven by collective intelligence and making sure the ecosystem is symbiotic and mutualistic and not parasitic, then even in that case, when we have investment and not financialization, we end up having a dysfunctional economy. Look at what happened with COVID. We had 8 different vaccines, fruit of lots of public and private investment, and yet we didn't vaccinate the world. And that, of course, was the mission. If you have a global pandemic, it's not enough to have 8 vaccines. The mission, the moonshot, has to be to vaccinate everybody. And we didn't get that. We had vaccine nationalism. We had hoarding of vaccines. But also, in terms of my previous point, how business was done, how innovation was done, it was done problematically. We allowed the patent system, the intellectual property rights system, to remain governed in a very extractive way. Patents, this is even pre-COVID, a huge problem. Patents are often too wide, just used for strategic reasons, too strong, hard to license, and too upstream in the innovation chain. So the tools for research, the upstream knowledge is getting privatized. That's not what patents originally were for. So I just want to sum up what I think needs to be the solution to all of this. We need to move out of this reactive mode if we care about inequality, if we care about climate change, if we care about health pandemics so that the next time we are more prepared, if we care about health for all, if we care about reducing the digital divide to zero. So first of all, we need to be very explicit that economic growth has not just a rate, but a direction. And that direction itself, I was just reflecting on it before, can be either functional or dysfunctional. Financialized growth is a dysfunctional type of growth. Growth that is driven by private debt. So consumption-led growth that is driven by private debt-led consumption is also a dysfunctional type of growth. Growth that leads to massive global warming of the scale that the IPCC report tells us today, that we are soon to be at an irreversible phase of that direction of growth, is not the kind of growth we want. So if we want inclusive and sustainable growth, and if we want that to be outcomes oriented around the sustainable development goals that every single country has signed up to since 2015, we need to be thinking about what does it look like to actively shape and create the economy to deliver on outcomes, to deliver on the SDGs, and to direct all of the different levers that we have to get there, right? What does it mean in terms of outcomes-oriented procurement policy? Every government, whether it's small, medium, or large, has a large percentage of its budget just for purchasing things, whether it's purchasing materials to make motorways, whether it's purchasing hospital beds, schools. We can use procurement to actually shape an economy. It can be green procurement. It can be outcomes-oriented procurement in terms of goals like zeroing the digital divide. But that means to be very clear, to provide a direction on those instruments. And those can be grants, loans, procurement, even bailout schemes can be outcomes-oriented. So having a purposeful direction to the economy, what I call a mission-oriented economy. Second, we need to recognize that we need, of course, both public, private, third sector actors to invest. But that type of investment has to be actually framed and structured around collective learning and true collaboration, where the sharing of the knowledge is also about sharing the risks and the rewards that are fruits of that knowledge. And that attention to collaboration and collective intelligence, I think, truly requires a common good approach. We often talk about the common good as though it's out there as a framing, but unfortunately, again, in economics, we use the word good in a very lazy way. We even talk about the public good, but again, it's been framed in terms of fixing something that the private sector or other actors are not doing. So a common good approach, which is an objective, really requires attention to how we collaborate, how we learn from each other, how knowledge is shared. And on that, we should remember also that with COVID-19, some companies, by the way, agreed to do that. Look at what AstraZeneca and the Oxford University researchers did. They created a nice tense deal that the knowledge would be shared, that the costs would remain low, that so access would be greater in different parts of the world, knowledge could be shared around patent pools. And some other companies like Pfizer did not agree to do that. And I'm not naming companies to be, to say us versus them. It's just to say there's heterogeneity. It's not one way that public and private work together. We should learn, what did it look like on the ground when public and private actors work together with real collective intelligence and an agreement on sharing knowledge and not having extractive relationships with intellectual property rights. And let's scale up those lessons. Third, this idea of reward sharing really means putting access, equity, and justice at the center of the design of all the different relationships, right? So unfortunately, often when we put in public money, we think that's good because we're putting in public money to clean water or to have renewable energy or to have a dynamic life sciences sector. But unless we really also think of what's the right deal in terms of also making sure we share the rewards as equitably as the risk itself was taken, then we get into trouble. And this requires also having a portfolio mindset from a public investment side, if we think of the role of the EIB or other development banks across the world. So making sure that whether it's through equity stakes or other kind of community wealth funds or different ways to truly share the financial but also non-financial rewards. Basically, we need a common good approach about market shaping, not market fixing, purposeful direction, collaboration and collective learning, reward sharing with equitable access at the center, and fourth, transparency and accountability. And I think if we design an economy driven by these four principles, we will be in a much better shape and stop being so reactive to crisis after crisis. Thank you.
We reached the end of this podcast. For more deep debate and data-driven solutions, follow the PolicyNet podcast on all major platforms.